You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Indie Comics with Gray show. And, of course, that means I'm here with Gray from Wakazashi's Tea House. What up, Gray?
Hey, how's it going, Jim? It's Friday night here, late in Japan, but I've had a great week of comics. What about you?
Yeah, it was pretty good. And we're doing The Sacrificers here by Rick Remender and Max Fumara. This came out last week, but since we only do one comic each week, we kind of might have some overlap here. I was looking through some things, and there were some things that came out this week, but this is one that a lot of people told me was really good. So I ended up asking if you wanted to do that. We decided to do it, read it, and then I was a bit confused as I was reading it, had to read it a couple times. Hopefully by the end, me and you will be somewhat positive about it because I saw a lot of people really enjoying it. I'm not going to spoil if we do just yet, but I'll read the solicit and then we'll get into what it is. The Sacrificers #1, written by Rick Remender, art by Max Fumara. And it came out by Image Comics, $3.99. Like I said, came out last week as we're recording it. And here's the solicit, which I'm giving the solicit because it actually gives us some more information than maybe the first issue of the comic. You tell me if that is the case. Tomorrow is a harmonious paradise thanks to 5 families who make everything perfect for the price of 1 child per household. And I have 5 kids, so that seems like a cheap price, right?
Is that a good deal for you,
I
Jim?
might be able to make that deal, I think. It all depends on the day of which one I'd give up, but still. Now, as that bill comes due, a son expected to give everything for a family that never loved him and an affluent daughter determined to destroy utopia must unite to end one generation's unnaturally protracted reign. So it does set up a bunch of the conflict in here in the solicit, because in the story itself, by the end, like I said, I did like it, but it seems almost a bit incomplete by the end, and it kind of leaves you wondering, but maybe that's a good thing to keep you going. What did you think when you first read it? I mean, the art's good, right?
Yes, I'm a big fan of the art. You were saying it's Max Fumara, who I saw his work on both Lucifer, the Dan Watters run, and also Abe Sapien, Jim. Are you a fan of Abe Sapien?
I haven't read a lot of the Abe Sapien books, but we end up doing a Hellboy podcast on the Patreon.
Yeah.
And I really do like the character, at least what I've gotten from him from the BPRD stuff and the regular Hellboy stuff. He's one of my favorite characters. So yeah, eventually we'll get to the Abe Sapien solo stuff as well. And then I'll go like, oh my God, yeah, I remember. Gray told me all about the art here. And
cool.
That might be like 5-10 years from now. We'll see, because of the scheduling of how we do it. But still, we'll get to that eventually. But I do like it. And it has that kind of fantasy cartoony look. And when you get into it, I mean, right away you see this like cottage. You see that it's, out in the wild. It's not, this isn't taking place in the city at least. But then when you get into it, you're like, okay, I see some animals. Oh, wait a minute. The main characters here are like bird people and they're praying over dinner. Or are they? It's weird, too, because at one point I'm sitting there and every time I see the dad, I start thinking that he might not be a bird, but then he is. And it gets me all wacky. At one point I'm like, is he a platypus? But no, it looks like he's a bird, man. So they end up in there, they're praying. And as they are eating dinner, you see this other bird come by. And at first I'm like, what is this? Like a neighbor peeping? Because he comes by and looks shocked that they see him. And then the dad goes like, I'm going to go take care of this, and takes off his belt as he runs out. And this kid, whatever it ends up being their son. He runs into the barn and he gets a brutal beating, right?
Yeah, that is a scary reaction from the dad. It made me think, first of all, I didn't even know he was his son. By the reaction, I thought, maybe he thought he was a thief or some dodgy scallywag. But Jim, what do you think? Taking the buckle to the boy, it's a shame.
Oh, I know. I mean, he takes his belt and he's hitting him with the buckle. That's crazy. Yikes. And then he says, on any day like you are a selfish boy, he says, though, what does he say? To make your mother look at you tonight of all nights. And then what's going on? Like that? Yeah. That's pretty brutal. And then the dad says, you want attention? Well, here you go. And it starts hitting him with the buckle and then says, you're a selfish boy as he walks out. Now, making it even worse is that he has beaten this son. We end up finding out it is his son so much that he can't even catch his breath. Like that is bad, right? So he ends up,
that is bad.
and so you're sitting there and like, what is this all about? Like, what is this? And then you go, and later that night, one of the kids wakes up, goes and gets this like little thing that they rolled up and run out to the barn where this son is laying there and gives what looks like bread or eggs. I actually at one point thought they were eggs. I'm like, that kind of seems a little sick if it was, but it's probably like a little bit of a bread deal. And gives it to him and kisses him and says, thank you. And then you're like, okay, so at that point you hit the credits page and I'm like, all right, is this going to be a book about like some crazy anthropomorphic, just awful father who's abusive, and this one son is just taking the abuse for that? I'm like, I don't know that I want to read a book about this. Like, it seemed really odd. The way
it's a dark start, isn't it, Jim? Dark and violent and shocking. I was looking for Usagi Ojima, by the way, talking about anthropomorphic creatures.
Yeah, really.
But he's not in it, unfortunately.
No, that would be pretty crazy. But again, the art is really, really good.
It is good.
It's good to a point, too, that then you get to see how horrifically beat this kid is. And I'm like, oh, that's bad.
He's got tears coming down, hasn't he, from his eye? He looks a right state. I think it's his younger sister, and she's just basically saying, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that's where I started thinking, okay, this is an abusive dad who's going to take it out on somebody, and this kid's taking it for the whole family. It's not quite that. It gets even bigger, but it's kind of that tone. And I'm like, when you first see this and they're eating and you're like, oh, this seems like a cute little thing. Like, oh my God, we're going to have some, fantasy anthropomorphic. Oh no, he's beating him with a buckle. Like, that is a weird shift. But then you get the credits page, which is pretty cool. Looks like an old time map. I was waiting for the Here There Be Dragons type of deal on there, right? That classic deal, but it looks great. And then you go off, and now all of a sudden we have a girl who looks like her hair's on fire, almost like a Starfire look. If you're a DC fan. And she's reading a book. She better watch out. She's going to catch that book on fire. But she ends up reading a book, and she's talking about, there was a huge war. They did this. And a typical kid, like, why do I have to learn this? Oh, I have to learn it because, it's to prevent it from happening again. She even answers herself. And then the bell rings, and she runs off. And as she's running, at first I was kind of like, again, I was a bit taken off by it because we start off by having bird people. Now we're here with a girl with fire hair. I'm like, what is going on? But as she's running through the halls, she does end up passing a big painting that she's there with what you would assume is her mom and dad. You see that they're pretty much royalty. She runs by a servant, ends up saying, watch out, Phlebe. And this poor Phlebe, who's heading off with fire cakes, we find out, ends up saying, Your Highness. So you get that play. Okay, these are the important people. These are the kings, the queens, the princess, you would say. It gets even more than that, but we go off, and I'll let you take over from where she goes and she starts listening in, which is kind of a cool way to set a scene to make it make sense. Like why we are here in this court with this giant, what now looks like a sun god. And you go with it because, again, the first time I read it, tell you I was a bit confused with what was happening.
Me too. We get a name as well, don't we, Jim? I'm not quite clear if it's the male or the female, but we hear, Rokos, my light and love. How kind of you to grace us with your presence. Then we see this huge being on what appears to be a flying carpet. What's going on there? His beard and his hair is a flame like his daughter. But the person he's talking to, I don't know. Is she the same? Like family? Does she have flaming hair? It's not very clear.
She seems like she has flaming hair, and it's Zia, and the way they're playing it, it's the, this Rokos is, I guess, his mistress.
Yeah, right.
And they're going back and forth to set up this, background. He mentions the Luna, the actual, what I would say, the queen, his wife. And then when you see by the end, you get that idea. These are also like gods. It's not just, king, queen, princess. They seem to be gods.
They look like gods, yeah, you're right.
And I guess the dialogue here, it is kind of a natural for the scene, at least. I mean, how natural can, this whole be? But the idea of him saying like, oh, you're my mistress. And I do like the idea. Basically, he says that, hey, my wife, she kind of got on my nerves. So that's why I have you. But now you're getting on my nerves. You better watch yourself.
Yeah.
You end up in one of the lines that I like, especially coming from a fire god, is that playing the role of the betrayed ruins, it's saying to Zia, his mistress, but then says, my wife, she's the ice that extinguished the flame that you ignited. I'm like, okay, that's a pretty cool way
is
of
nice
saying,
writing,
like,
gotta say,
I got sick of my wife, and now I have you. Now, if you do go and look, and you go back to the painting, you end up having, this Rokos, this sun god, and he has this flaming hair, as his daughter does as well. Not as much as him, but you do see what would be the wife, Luna. Again, that gives you the hint deal. And she does not. She ends up being just like, almost like, looks like she's made of stone.
Yeah.
And what I gather from this, when you get to the deal, that Rokos, he is kind of the sun god. He ignites the sun every morning so that I would guess that Luna, because of her name as well, she's the moon. And she ends up doing that each night. And they do look like they're polar opposites here.
They do, yeah.
And
catch.
the mistress, Zia, her hair she's like of the type or whatever of the king. So you kind of get that play of, yeah, I thought it was pretty cool to marry the moon, but she's kind of a little cold. Like, I'm the sun. Like, so I need some little bit of action that I can go with. And that's where that mistress is. But again, it's more of kind of giving you the setup.
It's weird, Jim, isn't it? Do you notice that her face seems to change, the mistress? At one point, she's looking in reflection, she seems young, then you see her, she looks older when she's talking to the sun god. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it is funny. She goes to that pool and says, this pool shows my former beauty. And I'll give her credit, and I'll give Rokos credit, because he does seem to have been sticking with her for a while. I think she's worried that he might be, looking around. She even says, you're spending more time with your wife than you have in a while. Like, what's going on? And at one point, the saddest thing here, because we already have Bird Dad beating his son. Then we get here and you have this Rokos dad, and he's talking, and he does seem to realize that, his daughter, Selûne, maybe not at this point, but realizes she's there, but actually says, if I could go back in time and not have this marriage with this, I would do it. And that kind of seems sad. And it does seem to kind of affect Selûne when she hears that. Like, oh, that's kind of sad, because he says the plates are engraved and she is the mother to Selûne. Like, that's the only reason.
She looks upset. You're right, doesn't she? Her face is like, oh no, imagine hearing that, from your father.
And then he says, the name's Selûne, so we get it, who is eavesdropping on me. And it's kind of a funny little name, the combination of Sol and Luna. So she has both. And you can tell even by her body and face, it looks like she has both sun and moon. Maybe this is an idea that we'll get. Like, she's almost like Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, whatever. She'll end up being the thing that brings everything together. And I like that she throws shade at the mistress as well, because this mistress, Sia, says, your lack of respect for our privacy reveals volumes. And she comes in and goes, your mistress teaches best what she most needs to learn. I'm like, she's a little sassy.
It's a good line,
And I really think that, you're really supposed to see she's sneaking in, she's listening, she's throwing shade at the mistress, which, what that is. And then she ends up saying, hey, I'm here. The annual gala was tomorrow, and we're going to do, and I want to be involved. And he says, oh, what do you mean? Her dad says, and she says, I'm 18. And he's like, yeah, well, and she's like, I'm allowed to go. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at this gala. And you start to put things together when you read this a couple of times. When she's saying this, and I want to be involved, and her father, Rokos, says, I'm not letting you. I don't want you to. It's what it reminds me of in a side deal is my wife will not allow any of our kids to get their driver's license until they're 18, because she thinks at 16 they're just not ready. And I agree. My kids are never ready for anything. But it is one of those things where she also doesn't want to admit that they're grown up yet as well. And I think that he's kind of going with that. Like, this gala probably isn't as fancy or great as she thinks it might be. And then after that, things, might go downhill. So I think he's trying to keep her, and says, I'm trying to keep you from it for a good reason, for being your father. So I kind of like the idea of it. Again, though, you're left wondering more than actually getting information. There's more questions than answers in this first issue. But then she runs off and basically says, I get what I want. Right? She's Cartman, runs off. And then he says, all right, time to do the duty. And this is where I had no idea what was going on. How about you? The first time I read it, I'm sitting the first page. Yeah, I'm like, okay, he ate these lava cakes a little. All
That's
right.
what it was, wasn't it, Jim? Yeah, a big, huge lava cake. And then he starts to kind of produce these little mini flame, what appear to be, I don't know, lizards?
Like salamanders?
Salamanders, yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And they're like, I'm like, what is going on? And at one point, you kind of get it afterwards, but I'm like, it almost feels like they're on a slave ship and they're going to man the oars at one point. I'm like, I have no idea what is going on. And to say that it's not the art's fault, because you get what you get. You just don't know what's happening. And I think it's supposed to get this big reveal to be like, oh my God, because it is pretty cool. But you go and tell what he's doing, because this next page looks incredible. This spread page. It
is incredible. You see these little weird flaming creatures. They seem to be like grouping together, and we just see this huge, like massive flame underneath the sun god. He's floating above it, and he's talking about this is like to fulfill the eternal chore. So it's the job he's been doing all his life, a world's light and life, and that's it, Jim. We see the sun, don't we? What appears to be the sun rising.
Yeah, it rises out of here in a mythological fantasy type deal. So every morning it seems that he creates the sun. And again, that's what a lot of people used to think, that the sun was created. And if you didn't honor the sun god, oh no, we're going to wake up tomorrow and there'll be no sun. It won't come out. So it all starts to come together. And yeah, it ends up. And I do like even the way he says it again, to fulfill the eternal chore, a world's light and life. And you see out of this, like, I don't know, this pit that he kind of gets all these salamanders into that kind of go around. And the sun does actually rise out of that. It looks incredible. And then you end up even seeing, and if you look before, you did see the moon, and you kind of see the face on the moon that kind of must be like Luna's face. And then when you see the sun up, you do end up seeing this Rokos's kind of face in the sun. And
does he become the sun, Jim? Do you think that? Does he transform into the sun?
I guess it's just maybe part of him, the way they're saying it. You know what I mean? Or this is just to be like, hey, this is mine, so this is what it looks like. Because he doesn't go up. It seems like he remains there, possibly. Or maybe you're right, because as it's going, it is enveloping around him.
Yeah, you see like a circular globe, don't you, appearing?
And then you start to wonder, like, how does he visit his wife? If that's the case, it's like Lady Hawk. Oh my goodness, we got troubles here. But yeah, you end up where it wakes up the bird family. We go back to them, and you have the father wake up, and you get more of what this family is about. And you do see, and this is the thing too, where it says in that solicit, a son that they never loved. It doesn't seem that way. The dad at this point, because how do they go from being the most awful person who's belt buckling, you actually feel bad for him, as if he is the one taking the brunt of this. I'm going to be an awful person. I'm going to end up making it so that I'm treating this son awful, but it's for the good of everybody. And by the end, you almost think maybe, because he gets up and you end up, the mother's crying and says, the look on his face, why couldn't you have just let him have one meal in the house with us? And the dad says that would have made it worse. And then they go down, all the kids are upset, they're crying, and they're looking outside. And again, now another bit of a shock, because how would you describe these people? You end up having really ugly, awful people coming, and it looks like they're, what I can only say here, are like slavers or, whatever.
Goodness. Very, very strange creatures, aren't you? How would you describe it? Something out of a sci-fi nightmare. These two beings are here, and they've got people chained up behind them, haven't they?
Yeah, and the one, I'll say the one looks like a jackal, kind of gets that, like an Anubis-looking deal, and that kind of fit.
Egyptian god of the dead.
And then in the back, you just get awful big guy.
What the hell is he all about?
I don't know. I mean, the only thing he reminds me of, and it's the craziest thing, he looks like he's like the guy in Jabba's palace, that the Rancor guy who gets upset, but in a weird, like, red way. I'm like, oh, there he is. But yeah, he's bringing people. And when you look, you see human-looking people. You see more bird people. Like it's a combination. And it's the worst because we find out they're coming for that sun. And when they show up, this jackal says, it's time for the harvest. Not even like nice about it. Like not even like any sort of humanity to the point. To it, right? Yeah, it's here for the harvest. This is really quick and it seems odd, but the dad says, I'm afraid we have none to give. Our sacrifice died last winter.
Yeah.
And they end up, and I thought this was going to be more of a play here. This jackal like just looks at him, and then the dad just walks, and I don't know if that's something else going on or just like, come on, we know. But you start to get the idea. And the weird play is when you go in and he goes back to the barn, we know the son's in the barn. The son is digging and says, I'm almost done. Like, is he digging to like hide? And the weird play is at this point, that's when I had it opened up a bit. That kid, the son, was told to always stay out of, any sort of play. He was supposed to hide in that barn so that maybe even neighbors think that he's dead. So when he came out to look into the house, he was looking into the house because he's leaving the next day. It seems that they know, okay, this is going to be the day. It has to connect to that big gala that was mentioned earlier as well, I'm sure. So when he did that, it looked like he ran out to look into the house one last time. But in the meantime, they're trying to hide him. But also, I said to you before, they know that they're going to have to sacrifice this son. So they have tried, or at least the dad has tried his best to kind of distance them all from him. And almost the idea, it's sad to say, but if you are raising a pig that you're going to end up killing at Christmas, you don't name it. You don't end up bringing it in the house. You don't get close to it because you know at that point it's going to be gone. And so that's something you do. And I think that's the case. That's why I think the idea where the dad says to the mom, listen, it would make it worse if he ate dinner with us, on him as well, because you do see he doesn't want to give up his son. The son comes up. You think that he's just going to hand him over, but they say, okay, we're going to put on the shackles. Everybody's screaming, don't do it. And the dad says, my wife's right. We can't let him go. We need him. You can't take him. And then this jackal says, he's already gone, Father. And it's kind of heartbreaking. Actually, it is heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, Jim. We've got a big family, but if you see in the background, there's like, is it 4? I can see 4 other children, so you could almost like argue, okay, come on, you've got 5 kids here, you can sacrifice one, but they're saying, no, we need the boy. It's like Luke Skywalker from Star Wars, you need him, Uncle Owen, you need him for the harvest.
Yeah, exactly. And they do say at the point, you have littler kids, all the rest are little. Yeah. And they say, okay, if we don't take the boy, we'll take somebody else. You want us to choose somebody else here? I thought the dad was going to say, take me. And that maybe they would have. But they end up where the son says, no, I have to do this. It's my duty. And people have read tons of stories where you'll have this sort of thing where somebody's, pegged to be a sacrifice or somebody's there. You have like the lottery, the famous story. It's a little different, but you get that idea that this is something that, unfortunately, if it's, firstborn son, whatever it might be, but you do see others there. It looks like girls and boys, but you end up, he says, it's my duty. I'm the sacrificer. And you do have the one little girl who has to be the one that brought those, cakes or whatever, starts yelling, no, no. You finally get a name because you don't really get names for these. And he's the dad that actually they say, it's okay, Beatrice. The kid says, I'll be fine. This will be to keep you safe.
This will keep you safe, off. Yeah.
Yeah, and they end up where the dad then grabs Beatrice and says, he's right, let's go. And does want to say something, says, son, and then just turns around. It's too much. And you end up where this kid gets taken away. Beatrice yells, I love you. He says, I love you too. I'm like, this is very dismal. You get a horn and like perfect harmony and order under one simple condition, one simple sacrifice. The jackal says as they walk away, all chained together. I'm like, that didn't make me feel good by the end. It is dark. It is a little dismal, but I was intrigued by the end. I mean, there is something to this where I am confused. I have questions, but there is that little thing of like, okay, I want to see what goes on because some of the things by the end really did add up enough to me being interested in this world and the characters. How about you?
Yeah, I'm the same. And Jim, that final page, there's a weird kind of what appears to be an almost alien face in the sky. Have you seen that? Not quite sure what
which
that
looks
is.
like the king, I guess. It looks like that Rokos, the way it is.
Yeah.
Is he there just like leering down? And it's so crazy. But again, that almost gives you that ominous overlord feeling as well. So there is a lot of symbolism and a lot of things going on here. And I think the character designs are great. I mean, that really is one of the things that's like...
They are. The art's gorgeous. It really is good.
So I'm interested to see where it goes. What would you give it?
As a score, okay, as you say, we kind of dropped in, in media res, as you say, like we're just dropped into the world. We're kind of finding out what's going on as we go along. I am intrigued too. I like the art, of course, I like, Fiamura's stuff, but the story, it was a bit weird. It's kind of started a bit rough with the father being so brutal. And by the end, you're like, okay, maybe he does care. He's got reasons for his decisions. But yeah, I'm in for the next issue. As a score, let's go 8.5 out of 10.
I'm a little lower, actually. I'm going to go 8, only because I'm still kind of like, what is this about? And I do like Rick Remender does a deal where you do think like, oh, if I told you, hey, it's a book that has like these fire gods and also these anthropomorphic birds, and you're like, oh, this sounds fun. Like you want to think that it's going to be this cutesy, fun story. It is dark. It's real dark.
You're right.
And
it's dark.
It's serious. It's dark. But again, I'm looking forward to the next issue. I'm going to keep reading. I actually even wrote in because at the end of the issue, it says to write into them and tell them, give suggestions of what they would call the letters page. I'm not going to reveal what I told them, but I think I might win. I'm pompous like that. But in the end, I do want to connect, but I still was like, I don't know exactly what's going on. I want to see more to really get the lay of the land, but that's kind of a cool deal. And then out of nowhere, I didn't even see this the first time I was going through, but there's a book. Rick Remender's, one of his next books is a book that seems to be co-written by Andy Samberg, the comedian actor deal called The Holy Roller, and I want that too. So we'll see.
No way! I didn't know what that was.
I
saw that solicit. Yeah,
it made me laugh. So I want to see what that's all about. But yeah,
okay,
you
cool.
even have there's a bunch of variant covers for this, and one of them is actually pretty cool. And you said the Abe Sapien stuff. You have a Mike Mignola variant cover that's pretty cool. There's
nice.
A bunch, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, I think I'm an 8, but an 8 with a look to it getting even better and better as I learn more about it. But I did really like it. I mean, Rick Remender is a good writer. Now, some people may disagree or whatnot, but this is a known writer that's written some good things. So I have bit more faith than if it would have been somebody who I didn't know or somebody who I've read some stuff that I didn't really like. So 8 out of 10, 8.5 for you, but that's that. I think people should check it out. I think it's good enough of a first issue. We were talking before, though. I think that part of me said it would have been a really good free comic book day issue as a zero type deal to get people intrigued. I think it would have worked really well for that as well. But when you get it, I think it's well worth the deal. I believe it's only $3.99 as well. And the art, you could say, the art is pretty much good enough for that price of admission as well. So I'm intrigued. I'm glad that you liked it as well. But that's it, everybody. Tell us what you thought of it. Hopefully everybody will check it out, and we'll be back next week for another show. I want to tell everybody, go over, and it'll be in the description for Gray's YouTube channel, the Wakazashi's Tea House. Go and check out cool reviews.
Well, thank you very much.
Me and Gray end up doing a show on Grant Morrison on his channel as well. So if you're a Grant Morrison fan, go check that out. All of that jazz. But thanks for joining me from Japan. In the future, it's a late night. I just got up and you're about to go to bed. So you're in the future. But thanks, everybody. Thanks, Gray. And we'll talk to everybody later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.